Sunday. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of True Story Live. We're glad to be here tonight. And tonight's topic is isolation and anxiety. Coldwater. We'll get into that in just a minute. But first, I'll introduce my panel, starting with my tired but very spunky and happy wife, Jen. Jen, say hello to the people.
Hello, people. Great to be here tonight, guys. Sorry if I yawn.
She had kind of a long weekend, so she went for a drive to meet her mom and her niece halfway, and spent a couple nights in a hotel with them. And
yeah, it was fun.
So I got a little alone time. You know how I took advantage of my alone time while my wife was gone? Anybody want to guess what I did? I worked most of the time. I did more work, which was wonderful. I don't mind doing it, but it's been a busy weekend for me as well in a different way. And so I'm a little tired myself too, but I can get through a 2-hour broadcast without any problem. So it's not going to affect my vigor and my energy to be able to move forward. We'll do that in a minute. Say hello to our illustrious producer and our friend from Australia, and also the writer of tonight's broadcast and doing the write-up. Glenn, say hello to the people, please.
Good evening, all. Hope you're well. Yeah, I can see them in the chat. Sorry, we've been a bit pushed to get this one together, but
yes,
yeah,
we got there. 5 minutes to spare.
we just made it. Usually we meet like 30 minutes before the broadcast just to go over everything. This was a little bit rushed, but I think it's going to be a good broadcast. Isolation and anxiety. I think it's an important topic and something that I'm sure a lot of people face. And we're gonna dive right into the write-up. Before I do that, I want to tell you guys about an announcement. And we think you'll be excited. Some people have mentioned this, and we've talked about it a little bit. And we wanted to talk about it at the beginning of the broadcast. We'll mention it at the end as well, just so everyone gets a chance to hear it, because I know some people come in late. But Glenn's going to tell us about something we're talking about doing, and we just want to gauge your thoughts on this as far as you think this might be helpful, and also let us know if you'd be interested in participating in that. So take it away, Glenn, and let everyone know what we're talking about.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I've spoken to a couple of people, and we just muted the idea of potentially a separate group on another night just to hang out sort of thing, where people could come on to have voice interaction if they wish, and just not so formal like in a show, but just basically as a way of communicating, getting to know each other better, etc., etc. Really, whatever form would or maybe work, or you feel comfortable with, or would like to participate or not. Just we'd like some feedback for sure, absolutely. But we thought there's been expressed interest, so we'll take it a little bit further and see just how much interest there is, and maybe go for it.
Great. Thanks, Glenn. So if you have any interest in that and you're listening to the playback and you weren't here in the chat, then you can still leave us a comment on this particular broadcast under the description. Let us know if you have any interest in that, or you can reach out, as always, to me at my email address, truestorylive.crips@gmail.com, and let us know. And that's also if you guys have any suggestions for topics of the show, or any complaints, or anything that you think is going well, things that you appreciate, because that helps us with content in deciding what subjects are good to talk about. Good to have these discussions. Have gotten a lot of positive feedback from certain people that seem to like the broadcast and the way things are going, especially since coming back after a year-long break. So if that's how you feel, then we want to know that. And if that's not how you feel, we want to know that too. Everything helps us to decide how to move forward. So any of that information that you guys can pass along would be helpful. So thank you for that.
Yes.
All right. And there's only a few people I see in the chat, but we'll say hello to them anyway. Jen, if you don't mind saying hello to the people in the chat.
Not at all. Hey, Liam. We've got Liam here, Stephanie, And Celine.
There you go.
Me, you, Glenn.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes people a while to get back in. I'm looking at the chat rate; it keeps going between 3 and 0. So I don't know what's happening with that. It's like people are popping in and popping back out again.
That happens.
Yeah, it does happen. Okay, so we're going to dive right into it. We're going to try not to run long tonight, since I didn't ask Glenn if he was tired or not, but just because our weekend has been a little bit long, we usually do 2.5 hours, but we're gonna try that. I'm gonna shoot for that 11 o'clock, and a lot of times I'm the cause of it because my answers are so long, and then you have Glenn whose answers are so short. So I'm gonna try to find the balance between the two, between Glenn's short answers and my usual long answers. I'm gonna shoot for that sweet spot right in the middle. It's probably a good idea. All right, so tonight's topic is isolation and anxiety. Coldwater. Isolation and belonging are not absolute, provable states of being. They arise completely out of the nothingness within you. You measure their dimensions against your own firm or shaky sense of who you are. Paula Sharp. Wow, this starts off with a banging quote right there. That's an awesome one. Tonight we examine the relationship between isolation and anxiety. Is there a connection? My son Michael, who has Asperger's, is a good example of such a connection. He desires his isolation from people, and yet he shows great anxiety when he feels isolated from those who support him. Go figure. Wonder if there is something in this for all of us. This leads us to our title song, a journey of going around in circles. Some of it feels as cold as it did when I put my foot in Lake Michigan in summer. What a shock to my foot. And the link is in the description. Coldwater. Click on that and give it a shot. Give it a listen. And about the song, it says haunting piano repeats its tale over and over. Airy booms give the support of a light synthscape and faint, sharpened squalls that accompany the piano on its unending sombre journey. Audiomachine album in a Daydream. So there you go. I really do like the songs that Glenn adds to this. It's one of my favorite parts of doing a write-up, and Glenn does a good job with it. And the Audiomachine, I've listened to a lot of their things as a result of Glenn introducing me to them. I'd never heard them before, but I have a favorite, and I can't think of the name of it. I think it was one of the first ones that he put in there. It just is amazing. But all their music is fairly good, so give it a listen if you have a chance. Okay, definitions for tonight. Isolation is a separation on a number of levels. It can be from the loss of a loved one, being shunned by peers, inner confusion, anything that leaves us with a feeling of being empty and alone. Anxiety is apprehension manifesting in uncomfortable physical feelings brought on by worry, tension, fear, phobias, flashbacks, etc. It's all a uniquely personal situation. Many of us have felt and do feel the isolation that comes from loss. Quote, you start to keep things to yourself more and more after loss. Ultimately, within the first 3 months, when people ask you the very important question, how are you doing? You respond with, I'm doing okay, I suppose, or I'm hanging in there. And that is when the biggest emotional separation sets in. When everything is different inside of you, but everything looks the same on the outside. That quote is from Christina Rasmussen. Once again, is this you? Loss can be anything from disappointment to death. I wonder if the amount of loss we feel is proportional to the value we have assigned to it. Here's the tricky part. Is isolation a conscious choice? If isolation is a choice, then why do so many of us feel isolated within our isolation? Maybe the following quote will assist. I don't think people understand how stressful it is to explain what's going on in your head when you don't even understand it yourself. Sarah Quinn.
So good.
Yeah, no doubt. Is this you? Stuck in the mindset that seems to have its own life form? It hangs over the top of everything one does. Sure, there can be distractions, and attempts to exercise the thoughts, but ultimately it's there waiting for us to return, which we usually do. People mention that they live with anxiety. What does this mean? Why are we anxious in the first place? According to the figures by the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the U.S., affecting 18.1% of the population every year. Anxiety disorders cost the U.S. more than $42 billion a year. It's a lot of people, a lot of money. Let's get to an example. A person who lives with anxiety wishes to reach past their isolation to contemplate a relationship with another. Quote, anxiety is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it does not get you very far. And that's Jodi Picolet. Or maybe if it's French, it's picolet. No matter if it is a friendship, a partner, a confidant, etc., if anxiety is brought about by the thoughts that one is, quote, not good enough, end quote, no one will ever want me. I will always end up rejected. Where is this going to get one? How does one get past the takedown and turn anxiety on its head? Is there a way we can adjust our mindset to alleviate anxiety in general? That's a great question, one worth answering for sure. So in closing, which comes first? Does isolation bring on anxiety, or is it the other way around? Might it be a two-way street? Many of us find our past is our biggest inhibition to our future. For you, JLK, perhaps this will help. And our last quote, I stopped explaining myself when I realized people only understand from their level of perception. Unknown. Well, whoever did that last one, if they're unknown, that's seems like a pretty wise person. That's some really good quotes in this write-up for sure. Very thought-provoking. All right, so there you guys have it. Glenn's write-up. Another excellent job with that, and talking about a topic that I feel is important for us all to discuss. So we're gonna dive right in it. And I also like that Glenn, when he does the write-ups, and I need to do this when I do the write-up, or maybe when we do it together, is to color code the sentences. Makes it really easy for me to find. And I have not done that when I've done the write-up, and so I've got to hunt around for it. But here they are. So I'll read the quote again before the question. So the quote reads, you start to keep things to yourself more and more after loss. Ultimately, within the first 3 months, when people ask you the very important question, how are you doing? You respond with, I'm doing okay, I suppose, or I'm hanging in there. And that is when the biggest emotional separation sets in, when everything is different inside of you, but everything looks the same on the outside. So the first question is, once again, is this you? And then it's followed up with loss can be anything from disappointment to death. So is this you? Talking about the quote above, as far as, people asking you how you're doing as a result of something that's happened to you. And just as Glenn said, it can be disappointment, which be on one end of the scale, to death, which in my opinion would be on the other end of the scale. And they did a study on what things cause stress, and death is on the list, and taxes is on the list, and there's a number of things that maybe they think people don't consider that big a deal, like losing one's job, or a family trip was listed on it. So there are a lot of things that we may not be aware cause stress, but certainly when it comes to grief. When I read this quote, I thought about how I have mentioned, I think I mentioned last week, how I deal with isolation in the past. I'm doing a lot better job with it now, but I did the opposite. So, in thinking about the grief of a loss, I was thinking about the last important person that I lost in my life for me. which was my mother back in 2017. And I did not isolate. In fact, I took on the job. If some people will remember taking care of my grandmother for a while, and in that, I was just I of course missed my mother, but I was in a really good place. Uh, I have thought about it many times since then. Why, when I used to think about it before my mom died, I thought it would be one of the most traumatic events that ever happened. Part of it could be that because of my belief system, I believe that I'll see my mother again, that she's in uh, to say a better place would be, pretty close for me, a better place for sure. But I believe not only is she in a better place and a happy place, but we'll meet again. So from my belief system, it's not over. This life continues on. And the Greeks would agree with that, as certain scientists believe that energy cannot be created or destroyed. That's interesting, since well, that goes down a whole nother. But they say energy can't be created or destroyed. So what would happen then with the soul if they've done some research to find out that the soul has energy? So anyway, all that to say that I did not isolate when I experienced that loss. In fact, I seemed to have more people around me than usual. And when people ask me, "Am I doing okay?" my answer was, "Yeah." Surprisingly, obviously I missed my mother, but I'm doing very well. It was really a changing point, and another reason probably was because at the time I was working my tail off and didn't have time for much else in my life, and so when this loss occurred, and I decided to take care of grandma, I did make a lot of mistakes in believing when my family said they would have my back. But at first, my mom is the one that had my back because she left us some money, an inheritance. It wasn't very much, but it was enough to live on for a while. So I was in a pretty good place. So, but when I think back to other things that have happened, like loss of a job or betrayal, things like that, I definitely have been the person to isolate. So there's hopefully my shorter answer to the first one, and I'll ask you, Jen. So once again, is this you?
I'm still peeling this apart in my brain.
Okay, peel it apart, babe. Peel it apart.
The part that says, and that is when the biggest emotional separation sets in. I'd like to ask Glenn, are you talking about with other people or with yourself? Emotional separation.
Well, I think it can be either. I think
Yeah.
you can assign an answer to each of those, Jen.
Yeah. I know for a long time with me, when people would ask how I was doing or if I was okay, I just would make comments that weren't truthful at all. I kind of felt like I had to act like I was okay when I really wasn't. Even through the marriage that I was in, it was the same thing. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Everything's great. So when I see the phrase emotional separation, I think about being emotionally separated from myself, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. There was something else I wanted to say. Once again, is this you? I do think I isolate sometimes, but now in life, having some safe people around
Yeah.
to talk to
Sure.
makes it so much easier. People that you can trust, that you can just share with and not feel judged or criticized.
Right.
And where you're at, you could be completely honest, and they support you where you're at instead of minimizing it and being like, oh, you're being too sensitive, or you should have gotten over that a while ago, or are you still
Oh,
on
yeah.
that? That's
Yeah.
just,
Really.
that's the worst.
Really.
That's what I was going to say. This part of this quote that I really, gosh, it just
Identify.
resonates. Yeah,
Yeah.
identify with, where everything is different inside of you, but everything looks the same on the outside. What a strange paradox. After my divorce, seeing the same people living in the same town, so much had changed in me and somewhat in my life because of being divorced, separated, and being out of a very toxic situation. It was very strange for there to be normalcy happening still in
Yeah,
life around me, and to be looking at it from a completely different perspective
sure.
because what had happened, it was just so shaken and different.
Yeah, yeah.
So those are my answers.
Okay, thank you, Jen. I'm really sure it's different for everybody, like
Yeah.
how you deal with these things and um, the feeling that you need emotional separation. One of the things you just said, Jen, and I'll comment on this really quick. When you have that, comments from people, or if you have that, people asking you questions, and sometimes you just want to be emotionally separated. And I think part of it is because people do react like that sometimes. So you said that you have safe people around you, and that's a result of being around unsafe people.
Hmm.
And when you share what you're going through with them, they'd say, "Oh, I think one of the things you said was, "Oh, you're making big, too much of a big deal out of this," or something to that effect. They minimize your experience, and yeah, why would you want to share that? I'm saying that's a reason to want the emotional separation because you don't have the good people to share it with.
Yeah.
You don't have someone that you can just be open and honest with that's going to be supportive. So I just said all that to say that I understand why people would want an emotional separation in this world when there are so many people out there that seem to want to make things more difficult rather than help us figure out how to make things easier.
Yeah. Or on the flip side, there could be some people that want to make it better for that person instead of allowing them to sit in what they're experiencing.
Right.
They might be
Oh,
uncomfortable
good point.
even with seeing somebody going through that. So they almost try to rush you through it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, it's going to be okay. And da, 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 um, and of course, you don't want people or yourself sitting in something for a long time. But a lot of the times, the ways that we don't repeat mistakes, if it's mistakes that brought us to that point,
Yeah.
um, we have to kind of pull it apart, uh, like look within, be introspective, pull it apart so that we don't find ourselves there again. But when it comes to like a death of a loved one, that it's a little different.
Yeah.
But still, it's like there's healing in grief. There's healing in grieving, and going through the seasons of grief.
I agree.
If you rush through it, oh my gosh, yeah, don't do that. So
You can't really, yeah, not only don't do it, but I don't think it's possible. I mean, you can
yeah,
pretend that you're rushing through it or you think you're moving past it, but um, your your body has a way or your mind has a way of bringing the things back up if you
yeah.
don't deal with it. That's true about a lot of
Oh
emotions.
yeah, yeah,
So it might come out at a time when it's totally not convenient for you, but your inner person doesn't care what's convenient for you.
yeah.
Sometimes it's like, it can happen to you while you're in an important meeting and all of a sudden you're having anxiety attack. Yeah, the anxiety and panic attacks, they don't usually hit you when it's a good time for it to happen.
Yeah.
It seems like it's not a good time when those things come about. And I think that in some cases it's because the person's not dealing with some emotion. It's my opinion.
I completely agree. I was just about to say something about that, but finish.
I'm done. I just think it happens when people are not dealing with the emotions. It's going to come out somehow. It's
Yeah.
like that.
Which,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
The
I,
splinter theory. I was just going to say that I've talked about before. When you get a little splinter and it's too deep where you can't pull it out, and your body will work it to the top. I think that's the same with unexpressed emotions. It's like that
yeah.
splinter that comes up.
And what's funny? I think some people get anxious about things and say, they're stuffing, they're not allowing themselves to process and to go through the grief. It's just, for example, if you lost a loved one,
Yeah.
and they think the anxiety is connected to losing the loved one, but it may actually be connected to them not allowing themselves to feel
Right.
what all is going on. And so there could be some confusion there.
Mhm.
Because I just read something recently that anxiety can be traced back to like what you were just saying, buried emotions.
Yeah.
You're not dealing with it.
Yep. Yeah. So the takeaway from that is, try to get into a place where you understand that your emotions matter and you should be able to express them. And I would say, especially loss. Loss is a big deal. And I think, and Glenn's right up. I think he's making the point that a lot of people kind of dismiss it. Well, that's what I get from it, at least in our personal experiences. They just kind of, and they might ask you how you're doing, but oftentimes, do they really want to know how you're doing? Do they want to be? Do they even want the truth? I don't know. Maybe there are some people out there that do, but okay. So enough of that. Glenn, your turn to answer this one. So after that wonderful quote from Christina, once again, is this you? Is the question.
Yeah, the questions are sort of a setup, which I think we've all asked people, oh, hey, how's it going? How you doing? But it's really, I don't know, it's sort of an in-the-face question where I think people in general are embarrassed to say what they really feel. I mean, they
Right.
can say to you, oh, look, I feel okay, I'm not doing too bad. And then when you look on their face, you can see that they're on the bottom of the floor.
Yeah.
And so it's so much more difficult, I think, from a human nature perspective to say, look, I'm not doing so well.
Yeah.
I mean, but in order to say that, you need to trust the person. I think Jen made the point. I think if you've got empathic people around you or someone that you do trust, I think you're more likely to come out with it. But just someone in the street that you're an acquaintance with asks you the question, well, what are you going to say? What, are you going to blab it out? I don't think so. I think you're more likely to be reserved. And by saying I'm okay, it really enables you not to go on with it. You can close it off right there and then.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of it's a question that is very loaded in my opinion, which we all ask. Maybe there's a better question. I'm not sure what it might be, but I hadn't thought of it. But yeah, it's
No.
sort of it is a setup, but
Yeah.
I think. What do you think? Perhaps you can say something.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think it's a good question. And you're right. There may be other questions, but that's a good one. I mean, it brought me to a place of thinking about the losses I've experienced and how different the reaction is as I mature. And I think again, a lot of it is because people want to downplay other people's emotions. I think we do it to ourselves. We downplay our own emotions sometimes,
Yep.
and that's not good either. I would want to get to the place where I know that my emotions are worth expressing. What I feel is what I feel. It doesn't always mean that that's what I go with. Like sometimes you feel an emotion and you know that it's something that is not reasonable or logical, and that's okay. It's not always what you end up, how you end up reacting. It's just a feeling, but to set the feelings aside or not to address them, I think that's a dangerous thing to do. Okay, so moving on. The next question is question/statement is I wonder if no, it's a question. I wonder if the amount of loss we feel is proportional to the value we have assigned to it. So now when I was just talking, I was saying that, as I've matured, I feel like the way I've handled loss is a little bit different. So it seems like I'm sort of already answering this question. I wonder if the amount of loss we feel is proportional to the value we have assigned to it. Again, this is confusing to me when it comes to my mother, except to say, why wasn't I more devastated? I mean, she was my mother. She raised me. She carried me in her womb for 9 months. This is not a small loss for me. But yet I wasn't, I'm not saying I didn't have times that I wasn't sad. Sadness, I definitely felt sadness and I felt loss, but it wasn't like a I don't know how to describe it. I guess it wasn't a overwhelming grief,
Yeah.
and I didn't expect that. I didn't. I expected. I fully expected to have laid me down, and it didn't. So I'll have to think some more about that. But I think yes. I think the amount of the value we assign to the loss, the amount of loss we feel. But in that case, it doesn't mean that I didn't feel loss. It just means that because of the things I mentioned, I didn't assign as much to it. At least I didn't have control over the way I felt about it. I feel like that was just the way that it was. I reacted the way I did for whatever reason, and I think it was, well, for me, it was a pretty good reaction rather than being laid out and not being able to move forward because someone dies.
Yeah.
But lastly, I don't think that I was avoiding my feelings. I think I was very, at the time, I was very open to how I felt, and I wasn't trying to, set it aside or anything like that. I wanted to feel it because I had already learned the lesson in my life of going through your emotions, not trying to hide from them, and deciding to allow yourself to feel certain things, whether it be anger or frustration or grief or any of the emotions. So go ahead
Yeah.
and feel them. So because I'd already learned that lesson, if I had been feeling more grief about it, then I would have been fine to deal with it, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
What about you, Jen? I wonder if the amount of loss we feel is proportional to the value we've assigned to it.
I feel like this could go both ways. Like having a lot of feeling of loss for something that didn't have a lot of value
Mhm.
or had
Oh, good
less, you know
point.
what I mean?
Good point.
But then what you had pointed out as well, not having as much devastation for something that you prior to it happening, you would have felt like it would have, like you said, laid you out.
Mhm.
Um, it's very interesting.
Yeah, like when like losing a watch or something that's important to you, you might get more upset about that than you do, losing someone close to you.
Yeah.
That's interesting how as humans we do that sometimes. Like you don't think you're going to react to one thing, and then you react, out of the box, so to speak, and to
Yeah.
something that maybe shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question. I don't think I can answer it in one sitting. I think I have to think more about it. I wonder if the amount of loss we feel is proportional to the value we've assigned to it. What do you think, Glenn?
I'll just start with something, Annette, although she's not here, but she said on numerous chats she's felt the loss of her father incredibly deeply. It's just an ongoing effect upon her. And I thought, like, I've asked her this question. I said, why? Why is this? And it sort of comes down to the fact that if you have someone in your life who you rely on, is your confidant, and someone you turn to in difficult situations for comfort, and they're gone, we are obviously very isolated by their loss. But
Yeah.
so that's a circumstance where I can understand it is the value to you is really irreplaceable in that sense. It has infinite value essentially. So therefore, I would agree with it. But on the other hand, um, I don't. I'm like you, Chris. I really find it's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
But I know that I lost my mum and my dad, but I didn't feel a sense of loss.
Right.
I felt a sense of, in many cases, relief for them that they
Mhm.
did not have to deal with pain anymore. But also,
Right.
I felt that I'd done everything I needed to do and say with them in life. So therefore,
Yeah.
it's not about loss then. It's about the respect and remembrance that you have for the effect that person has
Mhm.
had upon you, and you are very gracious and have incredible gratitude for what you've been through with them. So I
Yeah.
Good
think
point.
it's there. Yeah, it isn't lost. Now with your mum, that's a different situation. I was an absolute mess, and I think Sandra will tell you that I was an absolute shocker. I cried for 2 weeks, and I didn't even cry when mum and dad died.
Yeah.
So, but it's not about. It wasn't about grief. It was about the fact that I felt that she had not, in herself, uh, been able to do the things that she really wanted to in life,
Yeah.
and she had reasons for that. But I felt she could have, and she said to me, "I really would have liked to do so much more." So I felt that the feeling of loss in that situation is what for her could have been. And I'm not speaking about me or anything like that. I'm just speaking about her and her own life in the US, and that is to me an incredibly sad scenario, and it was very much reflected by my swept out situation. It took me a long time to get over it.
Sure.
Yeah. I was going to say that I think regret can play a huge part
Yep.
in the depth of grief, because if you have a parent like what you had, Glenn, with your parents, that's wonderful. And I think if you don't spend enough time with your parents, or say it's a toxic relationship and you had to cut them off, there's always that, like not wondering so much in your head, but just the hope that you wanted it to be different and it wasn't.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's just regret in all those kinds of situations where the relationship didn't play out as wholly as you wanted it to,
Hmm.
both ways.
That's a good point.
Very good point.
So while Glenn was talking, I was thinking about the idea of loss, and again, in reference to my mother, I do have these feelings even to this day. And first of all, I do agree that if there's no regret, just like what Jen was saying, she actually beat me to it. I was thinking that after listening to Glenn, I was thinking, regret is the key. How much do we regret? If our relationship with the person we've lost is good and there was nothing left unsaid, then you don't carry the regret of that, because you've told the person how you feel. So when they pass, you don't have the feel the loss in that way. Now, I do have days that I experience just the loss of not being able to talk to her right now. I have something like when I met Jen and I was excited, I wanted to share that with her, because my mother had been through, she didn't like my first wife, and I get that, but then she'd been with me through my divorce, and how difficult that was. And so it would have been nice to introduce Jen to her, and have her see that I'm going to be okay. Because I know she had concerns about me, and concerns that I wouldn't be happy again, and I wouldn't give it another try, things like that. And she was right. I was not planning on giving it another try, but this isn't giving it a try. This is a completely different thing. But so my point is, I miss being able to reach out to her, and especially early on after she passed on, I would reach for my phone and I would get this thought. I would think, oh, I need to talk to, I haven't called mom. I need to call her. And I would pick up the phone and I would look at the phone and I'm like, wait a minute, I can't.
Aw.
That's been the hardest thing for me. It's not the regret, and that there were things that were unresolved. And I'm so grateful for that. So grateful that that's not the case.
Yeah.
But it's the not being able to talk to them, I think, is the hardest for me. And that still is loss. No matter how you slice it. Okay, great. Good answers there. So that one's a good question. So the next one, in between the two, it's here's the tricky part. And the next question is isolation a conscious choice? I love this question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a shorter question, but it's very deep, in my opinion. Is isolation a conscious choice? I think there are a lot of things that are choices, and I think that maybe the way that we deal with certain things, the feeling itself might not be a choice, but the way we react to it oftentimes is a choice. So I would say that a person does choose to be in isolation, but the feelings they're having that lead them to that choice, those may not be a choice, but it's how you deal with it. So I hope
Hmm.
that made sense in some way. So the feeling that comes in may not be a choice, but the way you deal with it, if you're choosing isolation, that is, to me, it is a choice. You decide if you want to be alone. You decide if that's what you feel like you need. And
Hmm.
sometimes I feel that way. Now, the thing is, now that I'm more aware that that's how I react, I mean, some people have pointed out to me, like when something bad happens, is why didn't you call me and talk to me about this? And I'm like, I don't know. I, I'm more aware of it now. So now that I'm more aware that I have done this in the past, I think it is more of a choice. It would be more of a choice for me now.
Okay.
Now that I'm aware of it. If you're not aware that you do that, then it might not be a conscious choice. So there's my answer for that one. Not to drag it out too long. What do you think, Jen? Is isolation a conscious choice? What do you think?
Um, I think there are times it can be. I think sometimes it's subconscious. But when I think about the conscious choice, I love this question. Why do so many of us feel isolated within our isolation? If it is a conscious choice,
Mhm.
you think about secluding yourself. If that's a choice, a conscious choice, then why is it so hard to pull yourself out of it?
Mm.
I guess maybe it's easier. There's less likely to be hurt more than you already are. But I also got this picture in my head of somebody jumping into a hole to isolate, like a dark hole,
Mhm.
and then having a harder time climbing out of it. It's just one of those things that seems to be easier on the downhill, making a choice to isolate, but then getting out of it seems to be tougher
Yeah.
than the going into it. Um,
Yeah.
so that was my answer.
Good points. While you were talking, Jen, I was thinking about what about the people that don't choose the isolation? Like, for
Like the
instance,
subconscious.
Castaway. No, I was going to say like I realize it's just a movie, but people that have been stranded on an island, they didn't make a conscious choice to be stranded.
Yeah.
Um,
Or shunned. Like you think about people that are shunned from families or
right.
like the Amish community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And of course, a person in the Amish community would say, well, they chose that because they went against our laws and whatnot. But
yeah.
yeah, I agree. The Amish and being shunned, that may not be something that someone made a conscious choice about for sure.
Hmm.
All right, Glenn. What do you think? Is isolation a conscious choice? What do you think?
I think in general, it is a conscious choice, and it's usually based upon the place that we feel safe. I think safety is I think we all gravitate to places that we feel the most comfortable, and in many cases, there's a lot of comfort in the isolation because it's going to be a lot more uncomfortable if you are out there trying to deal with your issues with all this being bombarded by other people and other inputs, etc., etc. Yeah, but for the second part, I wasn't answered. Why do us? Why do so many of us feel isolated? Oh yeah, I think it's isolation is a double-edged sword. I think
Yeah.
because it's very hard to say, well, I want to be 100% isolated or I want to be 0% isolated. I think there's always some middle ground, and I think sometimes, yeah, which is going to override the other? Do we want to come
Right.
forward, or do we want to stay back? I mean, it's just an up and down. This is the circular song, the
Yeah.
Coldwater. You go
Yeah.
round and round and round, and where do you get?
Yeah.
Nowhere. And
Mm.
That's a good
difficult.
point.
Thank you.
I was going to say about this pandemic too happening the past year. We've kind of been forced into isolation.
Hmm.
And I have to say, I think I've gotten comfortable with it. So like pulling out of it, I'm like, eh. I know some people are having major issues with it, but for some reason, I just we Jason and I have called it our bubble.
Yeah.
and it's like this safe, warm, comfortable place.
Hmm.
So it's hard to get back into the swing of social stuff.
Yeah.
I went bowling with some friends a couple weekends ago, and I was only gone like 2.5 hours or 3 hours, and I just was like, I can't wait to get home. Jeez. Anyway,
I
good.
think that's okay. That's okay to like or to look forward to being home. It's a place that you enjoy, and I'm glad that you do. Glad it's not a place that you don't look forward to coming home.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, I was gonna. I had something I wanted. Oh, Marcus and I, my friend, one of my best friends, we went to a movie today, and we were talking about this very thing that Jen brings up. He was kind of venting a little bit about how people are using the virus as an excuse to not do certain things. And he was my friend Marcus. He was pretty upset about it. And I was a little surprised because my friend is quite liberal, and up until recently, he's been kind of just saying every time the subject would come up, and I would complain about what I saw as being the issue, with forcing people to stay home and the masks and the news, going on and on about stuff and inflating the numbers, all those things that, a good honest tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist person would be spouting. Um, but no, and instead of supporting it anymore, he like many of us is at the point where he's tired of it. And he was just sharing with me that the job that he just left, hearing people not show up for their appointment and blaming COVID for it. I mean, what they wanted to do worked, and so people are now making excuses for even other people about it. It's like, oh well, such and such is closed still, and they could open if they wanted to, but they probably want to just be safe. So I'm saying that people use whatever reason they can, and they seem to be doing that. And you don't need a bunch of reasons to isolate. You only need one. Maybe it's what you need, but it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. In my opinion, it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Sometimes you're doing it to protect yourself, and to me that's never a bad reason to do it. But I think if you're relying too much on it instead of dealing with the feelings, then it's not a good thing. I love my isolation. I just don't want it to be where I'm choosing to do that to avoid feeling something. That's
Yeah.
let's sit with that. So in answering the question, why do we feel so isolated within our isolation? I really can't relate to that because I don't feel I like my isolation. Doesn't mean that it's healthy for me to do it, but I enjoy it. Because then I don't have to deal with anyone else's stuff. I don't have to have my emotions played with or be
Yanked
manipulated,
around.
yanked around. It's just me. So if I do something to myself, then I'm responsible for it. There's no one else to blame. Does that make sense? So I really don't have a problem with the isolation. As I said, my issue with trying not to jump into isolation is that because I want to make sure I'm dealing with my feelings in an appropriate manner. So another great question. Did everyone? I think everyone answered that one.
Yeah, but Chris, just a quick one. You had to stop your isolation, did you not? Come out from behind the wall to connect with Jen.
Well,
Now,
sure. In some ways.
she could have just fumbled around with your feelings and could have been, a not nice person. But
Yeah.
No, that's true.
You have to test the waters.
Yeah.
That's true. Honestly, I did feel pretty safe with her initially. I thought I was right, and I'm glad that she was a safe person. But you're right. Yeah. I mean, I did have to take, we were talking, I forget what night it was. One of the
Risk.
we were talking about the risk of it. And yeah, sure, there's always a risk. And how does someone risk within isolation? We were talking about the people that are home they're not agoraphobic. They're not able to leave their home for whatever reason. That doesn't mean they can't take other risks. They can go online and take risks, but still, there's certain types of isolation that you are sequestering yourself. You're setting yourself apart, and each person has to answer the question, like, why are you doing that? Like, what purpose does it serve for you to do that to yourself? Okay. So there's another quote. I'll read it. I don't think people understand how stressful it is to explain what's going on in your head when you don't even understand yourself. Well, another great question. Another or great comment. Well, it's both. It's it's a quote and it's a question at the end. When you don't, how are you supposed to explain it to someone else? I'm paraphrasing here. How are you supposed to explain it to someone else when you don't even know what's going on with yourself? So is this you stuck in the mindset that seems to have its own life form, hangs over the top of everything one does? Sure, there can be distractions and attempts to exercise the thoughts, but ultimately it's just there waiting for us to return, which we usually do. Yeah, I would agree with Sarah that people don't understand how stressful things can be. And it's stressful when you're in the middle of grieving and everyone's coming forward and asking you all these sometimes inane questions. I've talked about this before, probably not on a broadcast, but when my mom died, it didn't irritate me, but I could see where a person would be irritated by people coming up and saying certain things. And I have mentioned this on a broadcast, like someone saying, "Oh, God just needs another angel." Well, that poses several problems. First of all, people don't turn into angels. That's nowhere said anywhere. I don't know where they got that idea. I do like It's a Wonderful Life, but Clarence wasn't a human that was changed into an angel. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
There are human beings and there are angels, and those two beings are separate, in my opinion. But the other part of the question is, or the other part of it is just people seeming to make comments, and they may mean well. They really might mean well. But I think it's best to just be there for a person that's grieving. And maybe they wouldn't want to be so isolated if someone just cried with them, or if someone just stood close to them or sat close to them and didn't say a word, but just let the person feel your presence. I think that might make a huge difference. And that would also be less stressful for the person, not
Yeah.
berating them with questions.
Oh, yeah, because it's super stressful trying to figure
Yeah.
out what to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to be supportive of the person. And we're all capable of doing that.
Yeah.
We're all capable of just sitting with a person or putting your hand on their shoulder, just giving them a meaningful look. Sometimes a meaningful look can say way more than words. And it's just someone can feel the warmth, see the warmth in your face, to see the look in your eyes, and just a look that tells them, look, this is hard. This is hard.
Yeah.
And you don't have to ask a bunch of questions. That just occurred to me. Yeah, you don't have to. Why do people feel like they have to ask them questions?
I think it's for them to make themselves feel better. And I'm not meaning like they're
No, that's a good
selfish
point.
jerks, but
No.
it is an uncomfortable situation. You have the desire to say the right thing, to say something that's truly profound or comforting on a big level, but it's like, what do you say when it's like
Yeah.
nothing's gonna suffice, nothing's gonna make it better and make it all go away.
Mhm.
So
You're right. That's a good point. Um, okay, I feel like I answered that. Don't even understand it yourself. Okay. What about you, Jen? Is this you?
hmm
Well, you kind of said some things, but
yeah.
is it stressful when
Yeah,
you?
I think I have been in this place
Yeah,
before where I think it's very easy for someone to ask someone, "How are you?"
yeah,
But to be the person to answer, uh it's really it's hard.
yeah.
I even get stressed out and anxious when people ask me how work is. I don't know what it is about work, but I feel so incredibly judged
Yeah.
with what I'm doing with my time and how I'm making money and how much money I'm
Yeah.
making. It just totally stresses me. I almost feel like I go in defensive mode, and it's not
Yeah.
like I get rude or anything, but like I'm trying to plead my case or something.
Yeah. Like hawk up all the good parts of the job that you're
Oh,
doing. And yeah,
yeah.
I'm really
It's
enjoying
so
it.
strange. I would just rather say, you know what, I don't feel like talking about it. But then I feel like it's gonna put off this air like it's bad, and it's not. I just
Right.
don't really feel like talking about work outside of work.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
Yeah. That's okay. And you know what? It's nobody's business. But, again, it's that social thing of you feel like you need to
yes.
say something. And the work thing is one of the most common questions. People asking that might be at a dinner party where you don't know anybody, and some dude comes up to you and asks you, "What do you do?" Like that's the most important thing is what your job is.
I think that's what I'm reacting to.
Oh yeah,
I'm just
absolutely.
like, you know what, there's way more to me than just my job.
Yeah. Well, we both have some of that with my
Yeah.
my family, especially my dad and in some ways my sister and her husband. They're all very hardworking, and I think that's great. But I think they work too hard. I think that in my opinion, is that they work and they do lists and they're always moving, so they don't have to deal with the emotions they feel. That's my opinion. I always said, and I said it openly to my sister. I said somewhere between the way that you work yourself so hard and what I considered at the time the way I handle work, somewhere between the two things, there's a balance, and then you have a person with a good work ethic that knows when to rest, and to take care of themselves. That's what you'd end up with if you put the two of us together. I've come a long way with that though, where I can work and I can do anything for a season, and that's the season I'm in right now. After not having worked for a while, is where I'm working a lot. But even I know, like today, I didn't do any work. Well, I lie. I did watch a video that was corrections to one of I shouldn't have done that. I just am realizing that I should have waited until tomorrow to do that. So I'm scolding myself a little bit for that. My point is that we need some time to ourselves, whether it's working too hard or whether it's grieving. As Jen said when she was making a comment, you can't rush through it. And I was going to say that one of the great comments that my mom had made to me was about you can't put a time clock on grief. And I never forgot that. And it's just ironic that she was preparing me for her own death and that with that comment.
Oh,
And it was true with my divorce. Like my divorce, didn't even know the person in told all of 6 years when I stopped having contact with her. So 2 years was the meeting and dating and engagement. And then we would have been married almost 3 years. And then a year before the divorce was final, when there was some contact back and forth. And so 6 years. But after the divorce was over, I would hear a song or at first I was angry about it. I was like, I'm over this. Why am I having this feeling? Why is this feeling coming up for me? Why is grief poking its ugly head up again? I don't want to hurt over this anymore. And I would hear my mom's voice in my head. Well, she was alive then, but I'm saying I wasn't always with her. So I would hear that phrase come up. You can't put a time clock on grief. You let yourself feel it. Let the feeling be what it is, and then you move through it more quickly if you're not trying to avoid it. Just
yeah.
go ahead and feel it and then let it pass, and then you're done.
Hmm.
So, as part of the question, I don't like the idea of being stuck in anything. So, stuck in the mindset that seems to have its own life form hangs over top of everything one does.
Yeah.
I don't like that with anything, whether it's work or whether it's grief or whatever it might be. For me, the biggest thing that I have dealt with is the heaviness and anxiety when money's tight. And I've explained this to Jen that before we were married and she was in my life, it was hard enough to deal with it by myself. It's even twice as hard to deal with it when you're partially responsible for someone else. Um, I can't even imagine how bad it would be if I had kids, but I'm learning through this.
Mhm.
And so by the time we're blessed with children, I hope to, when things get tight, I hope I'm able to deal with it even better than I did this last time around. So I need to give myself the same grace that I'm telling other people to give themselves. I need to
That
do that.
was yeah. That was the thing I was going to bring up before we switch to the next question.
Oh, sure.
I have been amazed at how mean I am to myself
Oh,
and
yeah.
impatient, so incredibly impatient. I start feeling stuff and right away I want to feel it and move on
Sure.
and be done with it. And instead of showing myself the same understanding and patience that I do other people. If I've got a friend that's dealing with something and it's taken them a while, I stand with them and Glenn, meet your mic, buddy.
That's, see, that's Glenn.
Oh
That's
yeah.
not,
I was like, what is that? But I've noticed, and Jason, you've helped me with this. This is why it's great to have people that are safe and that can help you see what you're doing. Because I didn't realize I was doing it, but he's had to remind me a handful of times to be patient and to share to show myself the same grace that I show others when working through stuff. Because there are some things that you just can't snap your finger and work through in the blink of an eye. I think part of it is because there's lessons to be learned
sure.
through it, and I mean I don't want to skip that. I don't
No,
want to skip learning some things about myself or God
no,
or
no, no.
life or other people. But I think sometimes it's painful and I'm just what? My whole entire life I have felt like I need to be okay.
Yeah.
And when I'm not okay, I just get so critical of myself. And I don't know where I picked that up where I feel like I have to be this strong, okay person all the time. That's just
Uh,
silly.
Well, it is silly, but in my opinion, you learn that in childhood. You learn by watching how your parents dealt with certain things.
Yeah.
You might have even heard them say, like something bad would happen, and maybe you didn't understand it as a child, but you saw your parents just seem to push it aside and just keep going
Yeah.
and not deal with it. So the message is, it's
This is
not
how you
worth.
do it.
Yeah, this is how you do it. It's not worth your time to sit back and feel something.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so wrong, but so many people do it. And some people would say, oh, it's just our generation, the baby boomer generation. Well, Jen and I were talking about this today. The baby boomer generation, their parents didn't teach them to deal with their feelings, so they didn't deal with their feelings either.
Yeah.
So they never learned how to feel lost. They never learned how to express their anger in a healthy way. These were not things that they did. That's not to say that a person, whatever age they are, can't do that. Any person that decides, hey, you know what? I want to work on something in my life. I want to change this. If they get uncomfortable enough with the something that's happening that they see in their life or something that someone else brings up and points it out to them, any person can change that regardless of age.
Yeah.
And there's the phrase, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. Okay, well, yeah, that may be true. It's not impossible though. The person has to want to do it. Anybody that has the willingness to do it can and should, in my opinion. Before we move to the next question, Stephanie Chuckser made a good comment and she highlighted my name. I so appreciate that she does that, or highlighted True Story Live so I can see it. So that's very meaningful. Thank you, Stephanie. So her question is, what if you're grieving your own life or lack thereof? This is such an important question, Stephanie, in my opinion. What if you're grieving your own life or lack thereof? So the lack thereof gives me the impression that, if you feel like you don't have a life. Yeah. I think that if that's the case, Stephanie, and I would say this to anybody, if you feel like you don't have a life, you have to feel that whatever grief is coming over that, before you can change it, you have to just accept that and go ahead and allow yourself to feel that grief. I think you have a legitimate question, and I think that yes, we can grieve that. It doesn't have to be some big event. It could just be what you're lacking. I'll give you, for instance, if a person like me wants to have kids and you go through a divorce and you think, oh, I'm getting older now, I'm never going to have another chance at it again. that was something I had to grieve. The idea that I'm not ever going to have children. And I may never have children, but the thing is, I've already grieved it because I didn't think it would ever happen again. I
Mhm.
allowed myself to feel it, even though it's difficult. So that's true for you, Stephanie, about your life. If you allow yourself to grieve, if that's your perception that you don't have a life, you grieve it, you allow yourself to feel the feelings, and then you do whatever it takes to change it. And I know that's a lot to ask, like, yeah, just change it. Oh, sure, it's easy for you. No, I've done it. I've done it. I wouldn't say that to you if I hadn't done it. I mean, I've had things in my life that I eventually got so uncomfortable with, I did something to change it. I'm working through that now with working out and making a lot of progress in my overall health and in my body and things like that. And then realizing that, I don't want to be a person that's so comfortable with the person they're with that just lets themselves go. I did that in my first marriage, and I have not done that this time around, but I
Nope.
was kind of stalled out. And so I think it was 2 weeks ago, I worked through these thoughts and feelings and thought, I am still uncomfortable with where I'm at now. So how do I fix that? Well, I can continue to be uncomfortable and just try to push it away and use distractions, or I can do something about it because I do have the power to do something about it. If I feel uncomfortable enough, I will do what it takes to change whatever's causing that. And I'm saying that with all love, and I'm saying that knowing that I've been there, and with all empathy, that if you feel like you don't have a life, then you have the power within your grasp to be able to change that. You can find a life. Any person can find a life, but they have to be uncomfortable enough and they have to want to do what it takes in order to make that change. Anyone want to comment on Stephanie's question? If not, we'll just move forward. So if either of you have nothing you want to say about that, then we can just go on to the next one.
That's really hard and really deep.
Yeah.
Um, I was gonna say it may not be that she has no life, but she's grieving the life that she wanted
Mm-hmm.
and didn't have,
Sure.
and maybe still doesn't have.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing the things that we picture, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it's completely normal and healthy, to picture things going a certain way. Um, Gosh, life is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't mean to make an assumption there, but just the way that I read the question or
Yeah.
lack thereof, I hope I answered that okay, and you didn't feel like I was singling you out or being attacking in any way. And Jen's not saying that. I'm not getting that from Jen. I just want to make sure that that's the way you took it. That just I was trying to be supportive, and I hope you take it that way. But if you didn't take it that way, please address me, and I'll clear that up. Okay, so did everyone answer this part? Is this you? I think so. Glenn, did you
Nope.
get a chance? Go ahead. Is this you stuck in a mindset that seems to have its own life form? It hangs over top of everything one does. Sure, there can be distractions and attempts to exercise the thoughts, but ultimately it's there waiting for us to return, which we usually do.
Okay, I'm going to go in a slightly different angle with this one.
Okay.
Go back to the quote. I don't think people understand how stressful it is to explain what's going on in your head, etc. I think part of the stress is that, truthfully, very few people give a crap about what's going on in your head,
Right.
and that can be stressful because with the thought that when you look around, that there's nobody here that really wants to listen to me. So
True.
it's sort of it's okay. Sure, it's stressful to try to explain it, but why are you going to who are you going to explain this to? Who wants to hear it really?
Right.
And
Right.
that's why I was picked that last quote where it says, "I stopped explaining myself when I realised people only understand from their level of perception." So you can explain a lot of stuff till you're blue in the face, but it's going to go straight over the top of people.
Sure.
So you're really in a difficult position here.
Yeah.
I think and I can see from that how easy it is to be stuck within your own mindset,
Sure.
and it can be all consuming. I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
It just it takes over your thought process.
Yeah.
and it's very difficult to live without this in the background. So,
Yeah.
and I think we do gravitate back to it
Yeah.
automatically unless we do what you suggest, and that is feel so uncomfortable to the point where we can't. It's just like letting your hair grow long.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to say, "This is just ridiculous. It's in my eyes. I've got to get a haircut." But it's only when it gets to the point where it's so uncomfortable that you really go and get the haircut. Up until then, you don't really care.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
agree.
thanks very much.
No, that was very helpful. I appreciate that. Appreciate that comment. I liked your example because I thought about myself. I shaved my head, so I'm not ever going to be at the point where it's uncomfortable to have my hair be too long. Oh, that's funny. Okay. So thank you both for your answers. That's wonderful. So the next one, people mentioned that they live with anxiety. What does this mean? Why are we so anxious in the first place? So we'll answer all three questions on this next one. People mention that they live with anxiety. What does this mean? Why are we so anxious in the first place? I've actually studied this again because I was going to be a counselor and my mom was a counselor, and so I've been in a lot of situations and read books on the topic of anxiety. Not to mention, I became an expert in the fact that there are different types of anxiety, and even if a person says they have it, it doesn't mean they're dealing with it in the right way. So I learned a lot about anxiety hands-on, both with my mother, who the way that she dealt with it was to sometimes I feel like she felt the feelings of the anxiety and allowed herself to feel it. And then other times she would just push through. I watched her do it. So I knew I could feel the anxiety in her, being an empath. So I could tell she had anxiety, but sometimes she would just, do what a lot of people do, is just work and use distractions. Now, as she got older, I think she got way better at allowing herself to feel the feelings. And I was proud of her for that. So I did learn a lot about this. So what does it mean? People mention they live with anxiety. In my opinion, nobody has to live with anxiety. And I say that because my first wife, she told me before we even met in person, she said it in her dating profile on eHarmony. In fact, it was in there that she struggles with depression and anxiety. The thing is that just telling someone that and telling them that it controls every aspect of their life and they're paralyzed by it and they're not ever going to do anything to change it, that would have been a red flag I couldn't have avoided. I did avoid certain red flags, but that's one that would have stuck out to me. Now, a person can decide not to deal with their own anxiety. That's their choice, but you don't have to decide to walk into a relationship with someone knowingly when they, if they were to admit that. So she had anxiety and depression, and in my opinion, it was a clinical case, meaning she should have gotten professional help. And she would go through the motions, had counseling appointments sometimes, but I was even present and during some of those sessions, and she would talk about herself, but it never got anywhere. I mean, to the point where the therapist was suggesting certain things, and then the next time we would meet 2 weeks later, she would ask, "Did you follow up with anything?" "Oh no, I didn't get to it." Well, you're not doing anything to change it then. So you're accepting the anxiety that you feel and choosing not to change it or to deal with those feelings. So all that to say, I realize people have anxiety. It means that there's something bothering them that they're not dealing with, in my opinion. You can't control the feelings that come up of anxiety, but you sure can control how you deal with those feelings. Whether you try to push them away and distract yourself with other things or keep working and pretend like it doesn't exist, guess what? It's not going to go away. You might not feel it for a while, but it's going to keep coming back. So the third part of the question, why are we anxious in the first place? I mean, do you have several hours for me to go through every possible scenario? It sounds sarcastic, but I'm saying there are all kinds of reasons why a person would be anxious. money situations, relationship situations, spiritual attacks, holding your own past against yourself would give you.
Oh.
These are all things that come up in a person's thought patterns. So we're anxious because we live in a broken, fallen world where there are not as many people as there should be that would come alongside a person and say, "Hey, let me just sit with you for a while. Let me just be there for you," as Glenn said, and as we all three of us have talked about to some extent. A lot of the reasons why we isolate and a lot of the reasons why we are alone in our anxiety is because we don't feel like there's anyone that cares, like Glenn said, and we don't because of the way people react, like Jen said.
Or we don't want to be a bother. That's a big one for me.
Don't
I don't
want to
want
be
to bother
bothered.
people.
I think you're doing way better about that, at least when it comes to me,
Thank you.
knowing that you don't bother me by sharing your thoughts and feelings and emotions with me.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
I think for some people it takes a while to get there, especially if you've been indoctrinated to think that, you know,
Emotions are a bother.
right, exactly. So why are they anxious in the first place? Because we live in a hard world. It's a tough world, it is. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. I mean, just look at the virus and the all the divides between, is this real? Is it not real? Should we wear masks? Should we not? Do we need to be 6 feet away? And does 6 feet really prevent you from getting infected? In my opinion, no. But there's arguments over all this stuff.
Yeah.
Or when you wear your mask in a restaurant, you're fine until you sit down, and then once you're seated, you can take your mask off because the virus knows that it's not going to infect you while you're eating. I mean, you're totally safe. And yes, that sarcasm was on purpose. It was intentional. The point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of things that can make us anxious. And so to me, it's not just trying to avoid it altogether. It's just when it comes to deal with it and take the steps necessary to move forward in a healthy way. That's all. What do you think, Jen? So three questions here. People mention that they live with anxiety. What does this mean, and why are we anxious in the first place? What do you think?
Part of me wants to say that it's just somebody not being direct, even if it's with themselves. I think some of the anxiety I deal with is reoccurring. My mom and I were actually talking about this weekend. It's funny that you mentioned it a second ago that she has this Rolodex of fear that kind of seems to pop up early in the morning while she's asleep. She'll just wake up and she'll calm herself. It's like something pops up, and it's always her past. It's things that she feels she should have done better with.
Sure.
And she starts ruminating over it, and then she'll put a stop to it. She'll pray and just talk some sense into herself because she
Right.
realizes she's dealing in fear. But then as soon as she cuts off that fear, something else pops up. And I was laughing because I was like, this is the exact same thing that happens to me. I call it the Rolodex of Fear.
Yeah.
She was calling it something else. And I said, but with me, it's the future. I just
Right.
could just start ruminating over the stuff in the future going wrong, and it's scary. But one thing I've realized that really helps is having someone to talk to about it, which makes me think when we're either not connected or we don't have safe people around us or people to share with,
Yeah.
we're almost, and I know we have God to talk to, but there's something about connection with people, trusted people in our lives where, or maybe we're not, maybe there's a way that we can connect to those fears within ourselves, but even within ourselves, we're avoiding
Yeah.
and trying to stuff it down and maybe even minimizing it like another person might. Oh, that, stop being so sensitive. It's not that big of a deal, blah, blah, blah. We'll say those things to ourselves, and we're not actually validating and acknowledging our fear or what we're afraid of or anxious about. And because we keep trying to shove it into a closet, it almost turns into a monster. It just gets worse.
Sure.
And it's like, what the heck? This small thing. I mean, there's been many times that I've been anxious about small things, and the anxiety builds and it turns into this huge thing. And even I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is like not that big of a deal, but I've made it into this huge deal. And I am having some serious physical reactions to it. Um, But anyway, I went off on a tangent there, but
No, it was a good tangent and it made sense.
yeah, awesome.
So there you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Glenn, you're up. People mentioned they live with anxiety. What does this mean? Why are we so anxious in the first place?
Well, the first two, I think anxiety is about something we have to consider confronting or to confront. Like it might be you've got terminal cancer, your child's sick, or it can be something simple like I don't want to leave the house, as someone said earlier in the broadcast. What does it mean? Us? I think I really do believe it's something that's in our heads and that we have to deal with.
Right.
I mean, there's very few times if you're anxious, it really is a free pass without doing anything. I mean, you don't just drop out of the feeling of anxiety and say, oh, it's all good now. There's got to be some action taken or something's got to happen. You've got to initiate some form of, I'm not, I can't even think of the word. I said confront, but some form of personal or mental involvement in the situation. Now, why are we anxious in the first place? Well, that's an interesting one. I can only relate this to my son Michael and Henry. This is clear as day. And I wasn't even aware of this until I noticed it. We were standing in this lift in a hotel in Berlin. We were waiting to go somewhere up to Finland or somewhere, and I had to push the button on the lift to go to whatever floor 5 or 6 or whatever. And I noticed he's wearing gloves. And I said, why are you wearing gloves? He said, oh, and he's shaking. He said, oh, I can't push the button for the lift and mess it up because I don't want to touch it because he's got OCD. So
Right.
there's an example of why is he anxious in the first place? Because he's scared.
Yeah.
He's fearful. He can't deal with it. So yeah, why are you anxious? Usually out of some kind of fear, I would think, or something unresolved, something we need to deal with, etc., etc. Yeah, it's a hard one, really difficult.
Sure.
Was it
Yeah.
Sure.
so personal?
Yeah.
I was going to share something that may be
Sure.
helpful. I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
I remember the very first time I had a panic attack was after I had a boyfriend right after high school, and I wasn't like super close to his grandmother, but his grandmother died, and I just didn't handle it very well. And I think for me, with the not addressing things or looking at things, um, I have always, since I can remember, been afraid of death and had some serious anxiety connected to that.
Yeah.
And I think her dying, and she was my boyfriend's grandmother at the time, it kind of brought it to the surface, like the forefront.
Sure.
And I remember like I couldn't breathe and I was gasping for breath. And I finally broke down crying. And I was at work at the time, in the bathroom, like not knowing what the heck was happening to me. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know. Like people didn't talk about anxiety and panic attacks all that much back
Sure.
then. And I felt better, but it was reoccurring because I didn't take the time to sift through what's going on. I
Mm.
seriously would remember thinking to myself, there's something wrong with me, and I don't know what it is because I didn't know what it was and didn't take the time to find out what it was. It made
Right.
it like 10 times scary.
Sure.
And so I was in a reoccurring way dealing with anxiety and panic attacks for years after that. And it was scary. It's really scary.
Yeah.
And even in my marriage, I was having nocturnal panic attacks for years, like almost every night. It was bad. And I wasn't dealing with some things. I
Right.
wasn't seeing it. I wasn't looking at it. My body, I think, was trying to get my attention. Like, you need to look at this.
Right.
And I just wouldn't.
Right.
So it's rough.
Well,
Anyway,
thank you for sharing that. And again, I think you're doing a way better job of that now.
yeah,
You know, recognizing that you're gonna feel what you need to feel and allowing yourself to do it, and also the not beating yourself up about it too. That's important. Okay, so the next one, the quote, "Anxiety is like a rocking chair; it gives you something to do, but does not get you very far." I think that's great. The quote from Jody there. That's wonderful. So the question that accompanies that, no matter if it is friendship, a partner, a confidant, etc., If anxiety is brought about by the thoughts that one is not good enough, no one will ever want me, I always end up rejected, where is that going to get one? Nowhere. And this particular question comes up a lot in different ways. These kind of thoughts don't get us anywhere when we say these kinds of things to ourselves. Now, I understand why a person would say these things to yourself, because you've learned it from someone else.
Yeah.
You've grown up with someone that discounted their feelings, so you're doing the very same thing that you were trained as a child to do, which is no one will ever want me, I'm not good enough. These thoughts, I always end up rejected. That's something I can speak to, the idea of rejection, and I've talked about it before. I purposefully avoided relationships because I didn't want to feel rejection. And then the irony is, when I finally settled down with definitely the wrong person, I ended up feeling the very rejection that I was trying to avoid feeling in the first place. So it happened anyway. So it was not a safe idea for me to isolate and not ever try or take a risk, because then I'm feeling nothing. I'm not even risking feeling what I am experiencing now with the right person, with Jen. I mean, I don't even want to think about what would happen if I had stayed behind that wall and chose to continue to not take a risk, not take a chance at feeling love with someone. And I would have had every reason to do that after my divorce. I would have had every reason not to feel that rejection again. But feeling sorry for myself, that's what this is. Not good enough. No one will ever want me. I'm just going to get rejected. I always end up rejected. Where do any of those things get you? They're all, in my opinion, they're all negative things. They're all negative thoughts and emotions. I'm not saying if those things come up, you should be dealing with them. If you're feeling those things, know that there's a reason why you're feeling those things.
Yeah.
And that you likely are not the one that created those thoughts. That those thoughts were given to you by someone else that had the same thoughts. They just passed it along to you. And the buck stops with you. No one else can make you deal with these things. No one else can change these feelings if you're having them. No one else can do that. You have to be the one to do it. So really the power is in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
As a believer, it would be something that you take to God. God knows how you feel. You're not telling him anything new. But saying these things out loud, prayer is for us, in my opinion. It's so that we can have it. He knows your thoughts already. So what's the purpose of prayer? You just don't have to think anything because God understands. No. That's like having a friend that knows you and understands you and you never talk to him. Because, they know me. I don't need to talk to them. No, there's benefit in the relationship itself. And that's what the purpose is. So sharing these with someone that you trust. God is always someone that we can trust, in my opinion. But finding another person, like Jen said, and I think this point is so valid, finding a person, God is great and he's comforting, that's part of his purpose. But I believe that he created people to be that physical touch that people need. A hand on your shoulder or a hug, all these things are things that we need to get from a human. And he wants us to be those kind of people that are willing to be that for somebody else. So ultimately, this gets us nowhere, saying these things to ourselves and these negative things, these negative thoughts that pass through our mind. And we've talked so much about you being worth living, that there's something about every person, and I really believe this, even Hitler, even someone that has committed atrocities, there's something about them that is worth living for. But in his case, he made some poor choices and he never got to realize that and had a supposedly tragic end, So for me, my answer to that one is it's not going to get us anywhere. Those things are not helpful in any way. And then the last one, how does one get past that takedown and turn anxiety on its head? I think I've already answered this one in many ways. You deal with it. You allow yourself to feel whatever it is you feel, and you do what's necessary, whatever that might be for the individual person. Some people read a book. Some people listen to YouTube videos. Some people find a friend that they can trust and share it with them, and they feel better after the fact. So find what works for you, and it may be different. There's no need to look at what works for someone else. You have to find what works for you. So that's how you do it. How does it get past the takedown? You get past the feeling of anxiety by allowing yourself to feel it first and then doing what's necessary. That's my opinion. What do you think, Jen?
I would have to agree.
Okay.
And that sounds a little harsh, like deal with it. but I know what you mean.
I'm always trying to do better, Jen. I'm always trying to do better.
But I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's looking at it, and working through it. And it's crazy how we think ignoring things will make things better. I don't think I ever thought that on a conscious level. I think it was more subconscious,
Right.
like survival.
Sure.
But it never has. It's never had that outcome. It always seems to get worse if you don't deal with it and look at it.
I think that's true about every emotion.
Yeah.
If you don't deal with it, it's not gonna go away. It's just gonna keep coming back, and it's
gonna
gonna come
fester.
back. It's gonna come back at a time when you don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier today.
Yeah. So, you agree that how does one get past that takedown and turn anxiety on its heads by dealing with it and doing what's necessary?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. Appreciate that. What about you, Glenn? So it's kind of a three-parter question here with this last set.
Yeah, I think first of all, be aware of do some learning and be aware of the person that you associate with you that attempts to make themselves feel better by making you feel worse.
Oh, good point.
So an awareness of that. We've got, as I mentioned here off the show, we've got this show here in Australia called Married at First Sight, where people get married just on the day. They don't know anything about each other. And oh boy, you see some incredibly dysfunctional behaviours. Oh,
Sure.
codependence, narcissism. It's like right across the spectrum. And this is one of them. There's a person on there. All he does is humiliates his wife. In the context of being the bigger person. I mean, I'm like, it's just crazy. It is beyond belief. So it just brings it so home. Be aware of the person who is going to do this to you, and get
Yeah.
out of there fast.
Yeah.
That's number one. Get out. The other one is, and I've said this before, is don't give a crap. If you get, just turn off. Don't. I know it sounds harsh. Don't care what people think, but that's how it is. If people are going to reject you, who cares? Do you really care about it? Well, if you do, where are you going to go with that? You're just going to continually be looking or go into a cycle where setting yourself up for rejection rather than saying, okay, I got rejected. Okay, end of story. I've moved on.
Yeah.
Oh, very critical.
Yeah. Or fighting for a person to be in your life that you really, in all intents and purposes, you should be getting out of your life.
You bet.
Yeah.
Why do we put up with people who are influential upon us in a negative sense? Got me beaten. I don't know. Well, I do know, to be honest. I know I've done it. So yeah, from my own dysfunctional place, I did it. Hopefully that's a lot different now, but yeah, I think we've all done it in some respects.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
I know I wanted to prove to myself that I had worth by trying to make someone who didn't care about me care about me.
Yeah.
That was like the only way to prove to myself that I had worth.
Yeah.
It was very, very twisted and toxic, but finally what disengaged that whole horrible cycle was recognizing that I had worth, me recognizing it without having to sort of prove it through some twisted way.
Right.
If I can get this horrible person who even hates himself to love me, then I'm lovable,
Yeah.
But yeah, just kick that to the curb.
Hey, Jen, think of the energy it takes to spend on someone who has rejected you and you want not to reject you. It's just like you're opening your own power station and just pouring all this energy into it for no return whatsoever.
Yeah, free
Wow.
energy.
Oh,
It's awful.
it is there a way we can adjust our mindset to alleviate anxiety in general? I think it's that attitude. I think it's your attitude. Yeah, no, like really. I mean, I understand there's rationale and reasons why people would be anxious. If I come across a brown snake, I'm going to be anxious, right? But
Yeah.
but that's not what we're speaking about here. We're
No.
talking about every day of our life where we're living with this anxious and nervous feeling. I
Yeah.
think you've got to. Yeah, I think you do need someone to open up to try. It's very difficult, I think, to deal with
Yeah.
this by yourself
Yeah.
because you don't understand it. Maybe your perspective of someone who cares is particularly relevant and important. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Good point.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. So, in closing, which comes first? Does isolation bring on anxiety, or is it the other way around? Might it be a two-way street? So, I'm going to read it again one more time. So, in closing, which comes first? Does isolation bring on anxiety, or is it the other way around? Might it be a two-way street? Well, I am obviously going to jump at I guess it kind of comes across as being an easy answer, but I think it is a two-way street. I think the two things can be hand in hand. Um, and I think both can come. I think sometimes we isolate and we have no idea why we're doing it. At least for me, that was the case. Sometimes I wouldn't even know why I was isolating. Now, again, as I matured and started to learn how to look at myself more, I would think about it. I would notice that I was feeling like isolating, or notice that I was already isolating or feeling anxiety. And I think, okay, why am I feeling anxiety? Asking myself the question. And 9 times out of 10, if you think about it and try to put your finger on it, eventually you're going to have the answer. It's going to come up. Um, Life has an interesting way of bringing the point up to the top of the pile, so to speak, so you can look at it.
Oh, yeah.
At least that's been my experience. So the opposite is it's going to come up regardless. If you're trying to push it down, it's going to come up eventually. But you're way better off if you allow yourself to think about it and allow it to come up to the top naturally on its own. But you do that by being willing to take a look at it. So for me, that's the answer to that. It is a two-way street, and part of the way to deal with it is just by, again, allowing it to happen and then doing what is necessary, however it comes up, whether it's anxiety first or isolation first. Either way, to me, it all comes down to something not being looked at, something that is coming up for a reason. It's coming up to be dealt with. It's not arbitrary. It's not just some
Nope.
random thing. There's a reason why it's coming up. And again, I'll say we, speaking for myself, we or me, I have the power to deal with it myself. And even I don't mean alone. If it means finding someone that you can at least talk to about how you're feeling, if that's something that works for you, then that's something I strongly suggest. What do you think, Jen?
I just got this awesome parallel in my mind when you were talking. And we've talked in the past with relationships, and this is one of Glenn's favorite words to use or phrases, about being direct in relationships. And so when your feelings get hurt, bringing it up right away with your spouse or boyfriend or friend or family member. Because if you don't, the feelings are still there and it festers, and then it ends up sometimes blowing out of proportion, or assumptions are made, or it just causes a deeper scar than this menial little scratch that it caused when it happened, if you would
Mhm.
have been direct and talked about it ASAP.
Yep.
And I think it's the same with anxiety. I think if we can be direct with ourselves in the process and practice of, having some anxiety and then sitting with it and thinking, okay, why is this coming up? Like you were just saying, trying to identify the root of it.
Yeah.
Then it just ends up being less of a pain in the took us
Mhm.
and causing issues down the road. But I think being direct with ourselves, and I don't know about anybody else, but you've seen this with me, and I think you've experienced it sometimes too, where when you're talking out with someone what it could be that's causing the
Uh-huh.
anxiety or the anger or sadness, usually for me, my emotions get kicked up when I hit the nail on the head.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
if I'm going through a list of what I think it might be
Mhm.
as to why I'm upset, and then all of a sudden it's almost like your body registers and it just rings true within yourself.
Yeah.
Like and your body's telling you, yep, that's it. That's it. And I do know people that say it takes them a really long time to find out what the root is, like what was making them feel a certain way.
Sure.
And unless I'm sitting on it and ignoring it, if I'm digging at it actively, I can discover what it is
Yeah.
quicker.
Sure. Good answer. Thank you for sharing that, Jen.
You're welcome.
Okay. So, Glenn. So, in closing, which comes first? Does isolation bring on anxiety, or is it the other way around? Might it be a two-way street? What do you think?
My gut tells me it's a one-way street.
Hmm.
Not that I've thought about it too much, but I just see it as if you isolate from yourself,
Mm-hmm.
this is what from yourself in quotes, I think that is potentially what is going to be relevant in your anxiety, but I can't see it working the other way around. I, I can understand how you can say I'm anxious about the brown snake and I'm going to isolate myself in my home so I don't have to confront it. But I think in this context again, I think it's all to do with how you see yourself. Very much like Jen said in another way. So I'm inclined to think, yeah, the isolation is what brings on the anxiety, although it's not something that we would generally think about.
Right. Right.
I need to think on that one more, but that's one answer.
Well, I think I'm going to think on all these more because I think they're great questions, and I don't think they're necessarily easy to answer. I mean, it may seem like, oh, he's got a ready answer for everything, but really, to me, it's not like that. These are things to be considered even more because I want to be a person that's dealing with the emotions that come up. I want to be that. And I think with that attitude, I like what Glenn said. It has to do with attitude, and I agree with that. What is your attitude when things come up? Are you in a place of trying to having a desire to figure it out, or are you in a place of just trying to avoid it? That's the question, and only you can answer the question. Only you can be honest with yourself about which it is. Um, and also, when we get into a stuck place or a mindset, repeating patterns that seem to keep coming back around again. And I've been there where I said, it just seems like every time I get some momentum, something pulls me down again. Now, that was true. That was true for me. It wasn't that I was making it up, particularly with jobs and stuff. I complained to Jen when we moved in this place, and I had some money from selling the townhouse, and we were in this great place, and I was able to experience being the what in my opinion is the real person that I am without having to stress out about finances and stuff. And I was going over all this stuff when I was looking for a job. I just had so much anxiety about it because I've been in a loop when it comes to finding a good job, and I've worked for companies that lied to people and were disreputable, and I didn't want to do that, and I also didn't want to work a dead end job that's going nowhere. And I vented all this stuff out on Jen, and bless her heart, she was so patient and helpful. And I don't mean that in the Southern way where it doesn't really mean what it says. I really mean bless her heart, because she was listened to me and let me, let the wind blow out of my sails, so to speak, and allowed me to say what I needed to say. But ultimately, regardless of my experience, what changed it for me and what has worked is okay, all of those things are valid. All those things that I mentioned are valid. And I had to say that to myself. because the message is, well, quit complaining, just go find a job. That's all you need to do. Well, I mean, that may work for some people, but I needed to look at why this is so difficult for me. And then once I did that, then I had to get to the point where, okay, now what can I do to change it? These are the facts about my situation. If I don't work, I'm not going to have any money. I'm not going to be able to pay bills, and then I'm going to end up on the street. Do I want that? No, I don't want that. Okay. So regardless of how my experience has been in the past, the only way to get past it is by doing something to change it, which means getting a job and working as hard as I can at that job, regardless of whether I feel like it's a dead end. The job I have right now is seasonal. It's not going to last forever. But that didn't prevent me from doing it because I needed something. And it was something that came up at the right time. And I'm doing the best at it. I'm not acting like, okay, this is a seasonal job, so I don't have to show up. No, that's not going to get me anywhere. That attitude's not going to get me where in any kind of job. So regardless of whether it's seasonal or whether it's a job for a short time, I'm only talking about me, not anybody else. My experience has been you do the best job that you can, whatever you're doing. And that helps. That helps keep you out of the anxiety. At least for me, it does, about the past, being in a loop with the jobs, not being able to find something long lasting that's been beneficial. I believe that by putting myself out there and doing the best job at whatever job I do, someone eventually is going to notice that. And this pattern will be broken by following it and doing the best I can. So that's what I've been trying to do. Okay, well, we're at the end, and I promised that we wouldn't go long tonight, and actually, it seems like we're gonna finish up a little bit early tonight, based on everyone's weekend and how long it's been. I hope that's okay with everyone. We're about 12 minutes before the top of the hour, and we've gone through all of Glenn's write-up. Before we say our good nights and everything, I want I said at the beginning of the broadcast that we would announce what we're considering again. So Glenn, if you don't mind, sir, let's go over that again, what we're thinking about doing as far as the opening up a Hangouts so that people can either, you can come on there and just listen, or you can talk with one of us or all three of us or whatever. So I think the way that you described it earlier was really good. So if you remember kind of what you said, or you want to say something all fresh and new, it's up to you. So let's talk about that again real quick.
Yeah, basically it's a forum for conversation. It's not too complicated. It's just to invite people who wish to come have a chat about nothing in particular. Just to get to know whatever. You can come by a chat. You can come into the Crips can send you a link to come into a group by the voice, as we're doing here. Whatever. But if you wouldn't mind, can you give us some quick thoughts or feedback in the chat box? So that would help us with a bit of immediate information. That would be, if you wish to, that would be great. So anyone who's in favour, against, who wishes to just say yes, no, whatever, idea, etc. I think it's a reasonable suggestion. Please do.
Sure.
If not, anytime you wish. But we wanted to kick it off if it was going to be relevant to people. If it's not, well, then we'll just continue to speak between the three of us.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks.
So if you have a comment on that, you can mention it in the chat box, like Glenn said, or if you want to think about it and you want to put it in the under the description on this particular broadcast, you can do that. That's another way to get a hold of us. We do see all the responses, and we've been plagued. Unfortunately, we've been plagued by these porn sites or whatever, and I try to get rid of them as fast as I can, but sometimes it comes through the filter. I don't know how it does that, but they do, and can't seem to keep them off of our page. So if you see that, that's what that is, and I do try to get rid of them as soon as possible. But your comments are welcome, legitimate comments from you guys, whether you're in the chat every night or whether you listen to the playback. All of your questions and comments are appreciated. So if this is something that's interesting to you, or you have any desire to do that, just to let you know, it's open. So if nobody responds, like Glenn said, that's fine. We understand. But even if one person wants to take advantage of this resource, then you'll get the attention from us. And if you want to, if you're a woman and you'd rather talk with Jen, completely understandable. If you'd rather have a group of people, the three of us or whatever, then we're open to that as well. So there you go. There's that. You can also, and this is true about it, if you have any comments or topic ideas, you can send me an email to truestorylive.crips@gmail.com. And if you want to pass something along, they've both shared their emails in here at some point, and they're free to do that, to type that in if they want. But if you send it to the channel email that I set up for True Story Live, then I'll make sure and make sure they get that. Okay, that's it for us. We're going to go ahead and say goodnight and get to bed here. Well, or at least start winding down. We're so thankful that everyone that continually shows up in the chat. You guys, I really don't take you for granted. You being here and having conversations we all appreciate that, because that means that we're doing something right. There are better ways, I'm sure, that you could, better or worse ways that you could spend your Sunday evenings, but you choose to come and spend some time with us. And that's why we're here. So thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for having conversations, which I think are all valuable. I don't know exactly what we're going to be talking about next week, but we will be back again next Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thank you very much for listening tonight to this. I feel like it's an important topic, and I hope that some of the things we said is beneficial to you in some way. And just as a reminder, the song Coldwater, the link is in the description. Go click on that and give it a listen. It is instrumental, like a lot of their songs are, so you can be doing something else in the background and just let it play and see if it evokes any feelings in you. Jen and I both, and Glenn as well, our music is moving. Stephanie says on Discord we could physically talk. Yeah, we can do that on Hangouts too, but Discord is something that works for a lot of people, and I think it's free. If we had enough people where it made sense to do a Discord situation, then we would do that. I think initially doing Hangouts or doing, if you're on Facebook, doing Messenger at first, because in Messenger at least you can either type. I don't know in Hangouts. I think you can type in Hangouts, but it's more for voice conversations. But we would, in Messenger, you could either just type or you could do a phone call. So that might be an option too, but the three of us will discuss how it actually look, how it'll actually look. And like I said, the more information or the more interest people show, then that will kind of spur us on to take that next step. I don't know how hard it is to do Discord. I don't think it's incredibly difficult, but it's just, I think it's more for if you have a lot of people that come in and out. So we'll look at that. Like Glenn said in the chat, we'll discuss it and decide what we're going to do about that. Okay, we're going to say goodbye, and I'll start with my lovely tired wife, Jen. Jen, say goodbye to the people.
Good night, guys. I'm sorry I wasn't as talkative tonight. I'm really tired.
Yeah,
But
okay.
wonderful to be here. And I just want to thank Glenn again for taking over the write-up. I was supposed to do the write-up, and I was trying to do a write-up on being known. And that's a really, really hard topic. And at first I was wondering why it was so difficult. And Glenn said to me, well, it's partially because everyone's different. How someone feels known is different to each person. And that was a really, really good point.
Yeah.
But he was wonderful enough to take up the mantle and write the write-up for tonight. And I really appreciate it, Glenn. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good night, guys.
Good night, guys. All right, Glenn, if you don't mind, say goodbye to the peoples, please.
Yeah, good night. Great to be here as usual. Very much look forward to next week, and we'll see about whatever we can get going. I think it'd be a great little forum just to connect. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I think. I think it's got some real potential benefits there. So yeah, I'm 100% in. It's going to happen. Good night.
Okay. A couple people that popped in that I didn't get a chance to say hello to. Kelly Ann Dean just popped in, says hello everyone. It's been a long time. Yeah, the good thing is, Kelly Ann, you can come in, go anytime you want. So we appreciate you coming in, and I hope you're doing well, and hope that the broadcast has been beneficial. Yeah, Kelly Ann, we're finishing up a little bit early. Well, it'll probably end up being close to 11 before we're done, but yeah, we're all tired, so we're gonna call it tonight. But hope you get a chance to go back and listen to the broadcast. Also, John is in the chat, so hello, John, and my friend John Dons was here earlier, and I don't remember if we said hello to Annette, but Annette is here in the chat as well, and I think I got everybody else, or Jen got everybody else at the beginning. I don't see anyone else that hasn't been mentioned. So again, thank you guys for being here. Everyone else say goodnight, and I'll just say goodnight as well. Again, we appreciate you stopping by, and if you're listening to the playback, do us a favor and hit the like, and if you're not subscribed, go ahead and do that too, so you can get notifications when we do our broadcast, if you don't already. I know Renee had mentioned to me, are we going to start doing broadcast again at some point? And she wasn't aware that we were even, I guess she said she wasn't getting the notifications. So that happens sometimes. Channels have a way of getting buried. I don't know why they'd mess with our little channel here, but it's possible. So certain people aren't getting the notifications, but you guys are. So, all right, that's it for us. Hope everyone has a good week coming up, and we'll be back again next Sunday night for another episode for you guys. So until then, good night, and God bless, and take care.